Come on, come here, boy. Come on. You freaky dog. I don't need to analyze every word that comes out is a lie. Make it look like you're so ice. You won't make it to the finish line. Now if you gotta know the truth was gonna let you go. You was fine, never mind, unpredictable. Feet eye off the ground, you ain't no one. You was started, but without expecting no fire.
Welcome, it's another Toolbox Tech Talk, and it's 2025! Woohoo!
Really was part your life. Basic bullets, with no bullets. Does your wife know you're begging for my notice? Promise you're the same.
Yeah, crazy. Another year. Here we go. Well, I like those odd numbers. And I hope you've all had a wonderful festive season for those who have a chance to celebrate and just to be with friends and family. All those who had to work, like me, just keep on chugging through all the craziness here, certainly in Australia with, pretending that there's snow on your windows when it's 38 degrees in Melton. Yeah, that's kind of fun. Cool. Hey, so today's all about voltage rise and understanding how it impacts on inverter systems. I'm going to be talking about the Australian standard for inverters, the Australian standard for installation of inverters, and what it has to say about how to mitigate against voltage rise. And I've also got a bit of a treat for you. I've been working on a spreadsheet to try and explain, but also for you to be able to calculate some of these things. And the spreadsheet's way more complicated than I thought because I'm going to include the New Zealand problem. Yep, the New Zealand problem is a real problem. It's a little bit crazy. It's all to do with the way metering's done in New Zealand. And by the way, I believe also the Czech Republic. There's a couple of places in the world that meter in a very weird way, which only really impacts on solar, doesn't impact normal users of energy. So let's see how my setup's going here. Good. Okay, so welcome everyone. Please ask some questions in the chat. I've been getting some great feedback from you guys and also some ideas for future Toolbox Tech Talks. So this one actually came as a response to an email. Someone was asking me about whether to put in a three-phase inverter in New Zealand or a single-phase inverter on a three-phase installation, and that sort of prompted me going down this rabbit hole. So if you want to send me an email, I'll just put my email address in the chat there with questions or suggestions on more Toolbox Tech Talks. Yeah, cool. All right, just checking all my systems are going okay and checking the chat here. That's all good. Nice to see you all. Now, let's just dive into a few things. I try to start off with just a little bit of appreciation. Of course, first up is appreciating solar cutters, and as you can probably see from my T-shirt, they have been a big supporter of the Smart Energy Lab and a big supporter of the solar industry, both in Australia and New Zealand. There is literally thousands of members of the Solar Cutters Facebook group in Australia, and there's a Solar Cutters New Zealand group as well. It's only really just started a few years ago, but it's all about industry people helping industry people. It's a great service. And at the moment, there's also some really good discounts for those who are members of Solar Cutters. There's a fee if you want to become a member of the group. You can actually join the Facebook group without being a member, but if you sign up to Solar Cutters, you get something like 10% off GSES's training, which is great. Southwell Solar Training, that's Pat Southwell, a legendary electrical inspector here in Victoria who's been doing lots of socials, and his show on radio has been really a big hit too. He's offering a 30% discount on his training courses, and they do get CPD, so that's really good. I should point out, by the way, CPD, continuous professional development points, is a requirement for accreditation in Australia. As part of Solar Accreditation Australia, you've got to get 100 points every year. GSES run both CPD courses, but they also run the actual accreditation courses, which is great too. And as do the Solar Training Centre. So the Solar Training Centre, they've been set, I think they started in Adelaide, then Melbourne, and then taking over the world. Well, at least various parts of Australia. So that's great. And they're offering up to 60% of some of their courses. I believe that's partly because there's some government assistance there. We've got to train up a lot of electricians and solar people. So that's pretty cool. Now, there's a few, there's probably quite a lot of people who are watching this who are not electricians and wondering about what training options there are. New Energy Training, which are based in Brisbane, they've actually got courses for non-electricians in design of solar, and you can get accredited, for design. So that's really cool. The other thing I want to repeat, reminder, is about the Smart Installer Program from the Smart Energy Council. There is a fee, no joining fee, but there is a fee now for access to the standards. If you sign up for free, you just go to smartenergy.org.au and you'll find there's under the programs, there's the Smart Installer Program, and I should have had it up on the screen, but I haven't, sorry. And there's a free copy of 4777 Part 1, the new 2024 edition for installation of inverters. But if you pay another $99 plus GST, you can get the whole bundle of 9 standards, which is a huge saving, huge. And also there's like 170 CPD points to be had from the various courses that are available on that platform, and links to other great content. I don't have much in the news for you guys today. I've been a bit slack, not really reading much, but I did notice, and it's actually old news, but it's going to happen here in Australia, is the Australian Energy Market Operator, who basically operates the Australian grid, is going to allow VPPs, virtual power plants, to compete in the wholesale electricity market. I mean, they announced this back in May, I think it was, or June, but it was a discussion paper. I'm not sure if it's actually going to be implemented yet, very soon, hopefully. But what does that mean? What does that mean, letting VPPs compete in the wholesale electricity market? Well, little mums and dads out there have got solar and batteries, or just solar even, but really it's batteries that make the big difference, can participate as a on-call generation service. Now, really, on-call means you need a battery, and you can be aggregated by a VPP supplier. And aggregation means that they have an ability to have some control over your storage system and allowing you to export power, but also even if you don't have a battery, to curtail your generation. Now, you might think, that's not good. Curtailing or reducing the generation from my solar power system, it doesn't sound like a good idea. But actually, when there's too much power on the grid, taking some off actually has value. Yeah, it does. It's just as much value as putting some on. So it's a two-way thing. So VPPs are organisations who put together lots of small players, lots of individual systems, and get them to operate as a single large integrated solution. And that means that they can offer or sell into the wholesale electricity market. So yeah, that's really good news. Anyway, just checking the chat down there. Thanks, Ray. That's very kind of you. And yes, oh no, 3-phase versus 1-phase fun. That's right. Yep. Well, it's really a New Zealand problem. We'll talk about that. And I'd be amazed, but if there's anyone from the Czech Republic, join the club with New Zealand. It's a weird world. Okay, so let's dive into this voltage rise problem. Now, I'm going to start by actually bringing up a spreadsheet that I mentioned, and I'm going to share the spreadsheet. I'll probably put it in the description afterwards. I've got to put it up onto a website so you can download it, and it's got no copyright and no, I'm not responsible for any errors in it, etc. It's unlocked. You can change it and modify it, but I'll just bring that up. Here we go. So what you're looking at here is left side is how things work in New Zealand and the Czech Republic when it comes to the value of solar as an offset to your consumption. Whereas on the right-hand side is the rest of the world, which includes Australia, of course. Now, you might think, let me kind of run through a little bit. I've given 2 scenarios for New Zealand, and both of these are 3-phase installations. So it's a 3-phase installation, but one of them has a 3-phase inverter. You'll notice that the power on the inverter, it's a 5 kilowatt at that moment, 5 kilowatts of generation is being spread evenly across all three phases. And that's what three-phase inverters do. It's called balanced. So balanced generation, they push out that 5,000 watts equally as 1/3 on each phase. But the load power in the home is not necessarily balanced. You might have very little on phase A and B, but there's a big air conditioner on phase C, and it's drawing quite a bit of power. So the red arrows down mean consumption, or can also mean, in the case of price, that you're paying for something. So you might notice over here I've got a dollar sign, and it's showing that you actually end up with a bill because that's a red arrow down, meaning not good. So the problem is that in New Zealand and the Czech Republic, and I'll stop saying that after a while, the metering is done per phase in real time. Now that's very different than Australia and the rest of the world. So that means that effectively there's 3 registers that are recording separately the generation and the consumption on each phase, and then calculating the net of each phase, like this, 1, 2, 3. And then those are all added together and you're given a bill. Now, this significantly disadvantages a 3-phase inverter on unbalanced loads. And just to give a few more details here, down the bottom I've shown what the buy price for electricity is in this example, and what the export or sell price for electricity is. Now, the higher that export price is, or the closer it is to your buy price, the less difference this problem is, or the less this problem is. But when there is a significant difference between your imported energy and your exported energy, then in New Zealand, the 3-phase balanced inverter is not necessarily giving you a great outcome. And I've put in here what I call the benefit. The benefit is to include the avoided consumption. In this case, on phase C, we're consuming 4,000 watts, but the meter is only recording a net of 2,333 watts because the inverter's exporting 167 to offset it. So there's a benefit there of self-consumption. Now, my recommendation is, if you are in New Zealand and you have a 3-phase home or business and you want to maximize the financial benefit of installing solar, a better model is to use a single-phase inverter. Yep, in this case it's the same capacity, it's a 5 kilowatt single-phase inverter, but just put it on the most heavily loaded phase. Therefore, it'll give the most displacement and therefore the most benefit. So in this case, the benefit goes up. So we're getting a much healthier benefit because we're offsetting consumption on that phase, on C phase. And the overall benefit, including the electricity that you had to buy in on the other phases, is shown over here. So you can see the difference. 3-phase inverter with 3-phase loads, the benefit's only like 26 cents because we're exporting 5 kilowatts. But when we put it all onto the heavily loaded phase, the benefit increases. Now, if you're not in New Zealand or a place that has this weird metering arrangement, I call it the rest of the world, it's super simple. The 3 phases are aggregated in real time. So if you're generating 5 kilowatts and you're consuming 4 kilowatts, so you're basically going to get the most benefit because you're completely offsetting the other. When I say you're consuming 4 kilowatts, you're consuming 4 on one phase, half and half on the other, which is a total of 5. That means you actually have a net of 0 purchased electricity and avoided, and that's what the benefit represents, you've avoided buying 5 kilowatts. So I've tried to put the benefit, which won't show up on any of your bill data, but it just illustrates why it's a much better way of doing it. So I've asked a few people about why New Zealand has this weird metering, and really I think it's a legacy from before there was renewables on the node end of a generating network, and no one ever really thought about, when the metering regulations were established, that this would be a problem in the future. I believe that the fix isn't simple. It's not something that the retailers can do. It actually is a government regulation. So there's another one for Simeon Brown to fix. Simeon Brown's the Energy Minister in New Zealand, and apparently he's going to fix New Zealand standards being out of date. And let's add this to his chore, is fix the New Zealand metering bizarre arrangement. And Ray says, correct me if I'm wrong, but does the 5% difference between phases restriction also apply to New Zealand the same as in Aussie? I'll get onto that, Ray, if I have time. That's about the requirement for when you need balanced generation. It really kicks in at larger capacities, so over 5 kVA per phase. So you can be out of balance below that. So in this case, not a problem, putting 5 kilowatts on one phase. Okay, so that's a rather detailed spreadsheet explaining that scenario. Let me just change over to my next little example, which is coming from New Zealand and Australian standards. So here we go. And this is really all about why we're having problems with high grid voltage. In fact, maybe I should just do a real simple picture explaining this. So let's get my little drawing pad out again, and get the focus on that a bit better. There we go. Okay, oops, wobbly camera, sorry. Don't want you to feel sick. So there's my play school drawing of three little houses, and don't laugh, it does look like play school, doesn't it? This is the grid here. So this house has solar, so it's a solar panel, there's a solar inverter, but these houses don't have solar. Now, let's say the grid voltage, let's put some numbers on here, it starts off at this point here at 240 volts, okay? So let's call that the nighttime voltage, or lightly loaded. But as generation from the sun, all sun-generated energy starts to mean that this home with this inverter starts to generate power. Now, if there aren't loads in the home to consume that power, it's going to go out to the grid. It's going to be exported. Now, Ohm's law tells us that you actually have to have a higher potential at one end of a wire than the other in order for current to flow. So the voltage at the inverter's terminals has to be higher than over here to where it's going. So that's exactly what an inverter does. It slightly raises the voltage, and the amount of voltage rise based on power is all about the resistance, and it's impedance really, of this cable. And so the longer that cable is and the thinner that cable is, the more voltage rise you'll get across it for exactly the same amount of power being transmitted. So there's one thing to be aware of. Long, thin cables are a problem for voltage rise. But at this moment, we don't have a problem because, and I need to cut back to the example I had. Where is it now? From New Zealand standards and Australian standards. Okay. So this is a table that comes from 4777 Part 2. Now, for ASNZS 4777 Part 2 is a test standard that all inverter systems connected to the Australian or the New Zealand electricity grid need to comply with. And there are some default settings. You'll notice in the regions on the left-hand side, we've got Australia A, B, and C. So they're different regions, like A down here in Victoria. I can't remember which B and C are. One of them's Western Australia and one of them's sort of northern parts of Australia, like Queensland, I think. And then, of course, we've got New Zealand, and then there is an allowable range. Now, that means the range at which it must not go outside of, or the inverter has to disconnect completely. And inverters have to respond in a certain time frame, and the time frames also vary depending on the amount of voltage mismatch from nominal. So let's choose, in this case, New Zealand. the volt point at 242 volts is when it's allowed to generate up to 100% of its power. So what that means is if the grid's at 240, no problem, just go full power. 241, no problem. 242, now we start to be on the cusp of having to reduce power. And when the voltage gets up to 250 volts, at this point you have to reduce down to 20%. And if the voltage goes to 265, you have to turn off instantly. So there is a kind of shut off point. And this is a little graph showing that. So no change until you get to volt W1. So volt VW1, if I scroll back up again, is in the case of New Zealand, 242 volts. So between 242 and 250, you'll see the power of your inverter reduce like this. But eventually, if the volts keep rising, it will turn off. Okay, so going back to this little drawing here, we might have started at 240 here, but at the inverter, to pump power out, we're actually going to be higher. So we might be at 242 volts here, and that means power will now flow in this direction towards the grid. But then you've got no problems. 242 is still within the limits for New Zealand for 100% power generation. But then your neighbour sees that you've got solar and thinks it's a great idea. And they put on solar and their neighbour puts on solar and they're all on the same phase. Okay? So now what we're going to see happen is a cascading voltage increase starts to occur. So this house might be at 242, so it's pushing up this wire here. So at this point, it's raised it a little bit. This house will have to raise it even more, 244. This house will have to raise it even more, 246. And now this has gone up to like 248. So what you're seeing is, that will be slightly lower, 242. So it's a cumulative problem. The more generators there are generating on the same feeder, this is a single phase here, the more that voltage rise will occur and push up everyone's voltage in the street. Now usually the house closest to the transformer will be the first one to hit this higher trigger voltage and have to turn off. So what does that look like? Okay, what does that look like? It looks like this. Now, many inverters provide some app or website that you can see the production on a daily basis or on a seasonal basis. But this is the daily generation pattern. And if you start seeing this happen, the power goes up, then there's a little gap, and then there's another little gap, and then there's a huge gap for hours and hours and hours, and then it starts generating again. That's telling me that in this part of the day, there is a sustained high grid voltage. So there we go. And that's because there's a whole lot of other generators on your phase pumping away as well. And this can also filter across the network because electricity flows in both directions through a transformer, so it goes back up the high voltage. And so transformers are basically dumb. They just have a ratio between their input and output, and that ratio will mean that as the voltage goes up on the low voltage side, it'll also go up on the high voltage side. There you go. So that's what it looks like. But yeah, what do you do about it? That's kind of the next big question. Okay, I'm just having a quick check of the comments here. So let's have a look. Charles says a New Zealand standard DG is normally 5 kilowatts export limit for single phase and 10 kilowatts for three phase. Yep, we are just doing a Sungrow SH15 hybrid that offsets phases to loads. Now, Charles just raised a good point, or interesting one, which is when you add storage, you actually got another opportunity to send that energy somewhere other than back out to the grid. And that can be very advantageous, particularly if it's DC coupled. So let me get my drawings back again. So if we've got there's our power pole, and power comes in, and I'm not going to draw a house this time. There's your main switch, and then we've got a load center, or switchboard, whatever you want to call it. So that's our switchboard. Okay, and connected to that switchboard, you've got some loads, and we'll call it loads, and we've got a inverter. But this inverter, this is the symbol for an inverter, converts AC to DC, DC to AC, bidirectional. It's got a battery. That's the battery there. It's also got solar. That's symbol for a solar panel. Photovoltaic solar panel. Okay, what that means is this is DC coupled. That means the energy from the PV array can flow directly into the battery through the inverter's DC-DC conversions. It doesn't actually need the grid to work, and so it can still charge the battery. But when it's charging the battery, it's not exporting power out to the grid, so it's not pushing up grid voltage. So it basically, as far as the grid's concerned, is not a generator. It's just charging a battery. So that's one way of sort of augmenting the problem of high grid voltage, is to put a battery in and charge your battery. Hopefully it's big enough to charge during that critical time of the day. You might even want to schedule it somewhat so that it's charging when power prices are high and when there's likely to be high grid voltage. I will show you a few tools you can use to find out about this. Everything from very expensive professional tools to quite cheap plug-in tools. In fact, I've got a little bit of a treat for you. I have another studio set up here, and I'm going to walk over to it. It's my workbench, but we'll get to that in a bit. So that's one option, is using a battery to charge from solar as opposed to exporting the power out to the grid. Yeah, so I did mention there is a way of measuring grid voltage, and I've got some sort of personal experience with this from the early days of doing solar back for me on grid back in 2007, when I never knew about this high grid voltage problem. And I had a customer ring me up and saying, your inverter's faulty, it keeps turning off in the middle of a sunny day. And I had heard about that voltage could be an issue, and so I went and measured it. So, you can't just claim that you've got a supply that's out of spec. You probably want to be a little bit more confident than just thinking that the problem's the grid. It could actually be there's a faulty inverter. So we put some monitoring equipment in. So let me show you that. Now, this is a bit of an experiment. Let's see how we go. I've got to switch screens. Okay. I think you can probably see me. They're waving away. Now, I'm going to have to use a portable mic here. So it'd be great to see in the chat before I walk all the way over there if you can actually hear me, because I've never done this before. I can see on my monitor that there is sound coming in from the microphone, but hopefully you guys can hear it. All right? All good? No one's commented yet. I know there is about a 12-second delay between me talking and you seeing it. So go on, Ray, let me know. Can you hear me? So the purpose of this little demo, oh, great. Thanks, Ray. All right, well, let's get over here then. All right, so this is my little workbench, nothing very flash. It's kind of where I do a bit of testing of products and stuff. Sorry, there's going to be a bit of a noise where I put the microphone in. There we go. That's better. Okay, so yeah, this is where I like to play with some clever stuff, oscilloscopes and things. But what I want to show you today is actually some meters, these things here. And because they're sort of lying on their side, I thought, well, why not give you an overhead view? So here we go. So these are 3 different products that can be used for monitoring the grid. Now, remember I said I had a problem with a customer way back 2007, and I thought it might have been a high grid volt problem. What I did was I actually posted it to them. I posted them this device here. This is called a PowerMate. It's actually an Australian invention. Well, I don't know if you call it an invention, but anyway, it was on New Inventors way back in the day, and it's really just a power meter. It looks pretty simple, but I love it. It's got a really big display. That's probably one of the best features of it. Is the display is really large, but it also logs. That records minimums and maximums. So that's the voltage on my microgrid right now, 238 volts. But if I press the plus button, I can see that there's been a high of 245. And press the minus button, a low of 216. So there's my high and low points. And so I just sent this to the customer. I asked them to plug the PowerMate into a socket outlet near the inverter. So it was measuring basically in the back shed in their case, which was part of the problem. We had a very long run of cable from the back shed, about 25 metres, and it was just the existing underground, probably only 4 mil cable to the house. And then the house was an old house in Melbourne, so it had aerial 6 mil supplying a single phase home. And as a result, it was not the best. So bring it back to me again. Yeah, so we sent them this meter here. These there's about 3 models now. There's 2 10-amp models, one with a LCD screen, one with the LED, which I really like because it's big and bright and easy to see in dim places where you often plug these in, like in a corner in a home somewhere to measure their fridge or their entertainment system. But they cost up to, I think, they start at about 150 or so Australian, and I think up to about 250 depending on the model. There is a 15-amp model as well, which you might need if you've got some large appliances that have 15-amp socket outlets. So yeah, a great little device. But if you want something much cheaper, something like this. Now this, if I turn on the overhead, so this here, bring it underneath the camera so you can see, is just I think these are about $50. Like, they're not very expensive. And so it's just measuring voltage, but you would have to keep an eye on it because it doesn't log. So you can go and take regular readings to see if it's getting up to those critical numbers that mean that are correlating to when your inverter's turning off. And why would you want to do all this? Because you want to be able to prove that there is a problem. And what does that mean? Well, it's actually a responsibility of the network operator to provide voltage within a certain range to your home so that your appliances aren't damaged. And so we can't blame the networks for this problem because it's actually caused by, particularly solar inverters, but they're kind of helping by trying to retap transformers and upgrade lines, etc. So they're the ones who can fix this problem. But like I said, you can do some things yourself, which is about when the generation is going to the grid. That's one thing. So putting in batteries, for instance. Another, which is when it's about installation, is when installing an inverter system, if you can locate it as close as practicable to the point of coupling with the grid, because the longer your submains are, the greater the voltage rise. In fact, there's some regulations around that in our Grid Connect standard 4777 Part 1, and that tells us what the maximum voltage rise on 2 segments, the inverter to main switchboard and main switchboard to what they call the point of common coupling, typically where your mains box is or where your connection to the poles and wires in the street are. So that's 2 devices, but there's a third one, and this is more a professional tool. So this is a power quality meter, and it has to be installed by an electrician because it actually gets connected directly in the switchboard. So they've got to open up the switchboard, click, these are the voltage connectors, and these are the current, can measure current, and it logs, and you can set the logging interval down to 1 second. So I've used this to get very detailed analysis, and it logs it to an SD card in CSV format, and you can just pop it into Excel and do some wonderful graphs showing how terrible the voltage characteristics are in your home or business. It also measures power as well, so energy as well. As do these meters. So all of these meters measure energy. In fact, really that's what they are primarily. I mean, even this little cheap one here, if I go to function, and you'll see it go to amps, watts, and if I go to kilowatt hours, there we go. So since I turned it on, we've consumed 0.1 kilowatt hours of energy. So there you go. All right, so I'm going to rock on back to my main setup so I can explain a few more things. I'm going to just put this on mute. Right, I'm back, I think. Yes. How was that? That's the first time I've ever done that, taking you for a little tour of part of my studio / lab here in real time. So that was kind of fun. Took a bit of thinking how to do it. You wouldn't believe how many cameras I've got set up and video switches and stuff. But yep, it all worked. Anyway, let's talk a bit more about the Australian standard and some of its requirements. So, okay. So this is still 4777 part 2. And if I scroll down, so that was called the Volt-watt response. That means basically when volts go beyond a certain point, the power, watts, have to decrease automatically. But we've also got this thing called VAR volt response mode. Now, once upon a time, the early versions of 4777 Part 2, way back in like 2007, I think it might have been, they basically only had watt modes and very harsh cutoffs. So as soon as you hit, depending on what the settings were in the inverter, but there were some maximums like 253 volts in Australia, you had to switch off within 2 seconds. And that turned out to be a really bad thing because every inverter connected to the national grid, whether it's Australia or New Zealand, is generating it basically at the same time because they're synchronized with the sun. And that means that if the volts go up to a certain level, they could all switch off together. And so you get a massive power reduction all at once because of in a very short cascade over a few seconds of inverters turning off. This actually has happened in Victoria and happened in South Australia big time some years ago, where basically it was such a big problem it blacked out South Australia for a day or two. So that was to do with wind turbines tripping out, but Victoria had a similar problem in 2009, I think it was, with solar tripping out, and something like only 300 megawatts of solar was installed at the time. So it was a bit of a dip. It didn't cause a black event. But now we've got gigawatts of solar, rooftop solar, and if you have gigawatts suddenly trip off, it's bye-bye the power grid. It just shuts down. It goes black. And it's very hard to start again. So let's go back to this new mode, which was introduced in 4777 Part 2 called Volt-var mode. And the idea is it progressively requires inverters as voltage goes up to supply more reactive power. Now, for those who are not electrical engineers or electricians, reactive power is probably a bit of a mystery. The most common example is reactive power is a bit like if you think of a glass of beer and it's got froth on top, The froth limits how much beer you can put in the glass. The beer is real power. The froth is reactive power. And so it doesn't do anything useful, but it fills up the glass. Well, in the case of electricity, it fills up the cable with current. And it's kind of useless energy. But what it does mean is the more reactive power you have being generated by an inverter, the less voltage rise you get, because it's active power that causes the voltage rise. So this is kind of a ride-through scenario. And if you're still not confused about what reactive power is, I think I have, where is it now? Here we go. So this is my oscilloscope. Actually, it's the one that was on the desk there. I've just connected to it over the LAN, and it's charging a battery. And the pink line is volts, and the blue line is current. And if you notice, if I put my pointer here, the peak of the blue line doesn't line up perfectly with the pink, the peak of the pink line. So there's an angle difference. So we describe an AC waveform of having like a 360-degree cycle, and so there is an angle difference between current. It's lagging in this case, so the voltage comes first or rises first, and the current follows. And that angle difference is the amount of reactive power. Now, it's way above my pay grade to try and explain this in a more technical term, but there you go. That's what reactive power looks like. And it's unavoidable with certainly appliances that have a high level of inductance or capacitance. So things like motors, transformers, switch mode power supplies, high bay lights, they all create quite a bit of reactive load that the grid or inverter has to supply. Okay, and yes, power factor is that ratio. So it's the ratio of active to reactive power. That's what power factor is all about. Anyway, back to 4777 part 2, and there it is there. So those are the settings that are the default values that inverters can be programmed with, but this is the defaults from 4777. Lines companies, or DNSPs as we call them in Australia, can also override those settings and have their own variations to suit their own requirements. So it's really just a guide. But there is one other thing that really helps reduce, and I've already mentioned it, is voltage rise, is keeping the length and the conductive area, is keeping the length short and the conductive area of the cable large. So the bigger the cable, the less the voltage drop. Once again, Ohm's law. So what you're looking at now is 4777 part 1, and the requirement in part 1 is no more than 2% voltage rise from the point of common coupling to the output terminals of the inverter. 2%. It's not much. And in this case, it's showing 253 volts at the grid connection point, and the inverter's at 257.6. So there's your 2% max. It's also kind of recommended, because once again it comes down to what lines companies or DNSPs require, to have maybe 1% per segment. So 1% from inverter to main switchboard, and then 1% from main switchboard to point of common coupling. And in some jurisdictions, I know Essential Energy actually have 3 segments. So main switchboard, subboard, submain, I can't remember, basically 3 segments. So anyone who's in Essential Energy will know those requirements. And often these are part of your online application. You need to put in these values. I believe some of them have calculators, so you can put in the size of the cable and the length, and it will also give you a traffic light solution, go or no go, whether your application will be approved. So there you go. Okay, back to me. Right, just going to check the questions here. Okay, Ray says, hang on. Ray says, except for the issue of AC solar needing a second inverter for battery. Oh, Ray, thank you. That was actually where I was going to go next, which was talking about sometimes a battery doesn't help when you aren't DC coupled and you have high grid voltage. So let's bring that one up. Okay. Go for a fresh bit of paper here. So there's our grid supply coming in, and the main switch. There's our switchboard and some loads. Just do little arrows for loads. And now we've got two inverters. So one inverter is a solar inverter. Has solar panels connected to it. And another inverter is a battery inverter. So this is what we call AC coupled storage. So that's my battery, and that's my PV. Now, you might think, well, you said, Glenn, that having a battery actually helps because it means that you can send power to your battery rather than sending it out to the grid. True. But whenever the grid voltage goes up here too high, and therefore too high at this point, these inverters have to reduce their power just at the very time that you want them to charge the battery. So in this case, AC coupled storage may not avoid the problem of high grid voltage by charging a battery. There is kind of a third way to help reduce this problem. It's probably the simplest one, which is put more load on. Don't export power. So if your inverter's shutting down, and let's say you don't even have a battery, you just got a solar installation like this, if you put more loads on, then the power is going to be going to the loads and not to the grid, and therefore it won't be pushing the grid voltage higher. So that can help as well. So synchronizing loads with the grid. Cool. All right. Now, I had a little presentation I was going to end last week's Toolbox Tech Talk with, but I ran out of time, and it's kind of a celebratory tale about why plugs and sockets need to be well installed, correctly crimped, and this is actually from a lines company, and they gave me the permission to use this in a presentation. So let's see if I can bring that one up. Where are we? It's number 5. See. Okay. Yeah, so this was a system installed back in 2007 and 2010. And in 2010, it wasn't actually a requirement to have a bonding of the PV array to earth. So you got to actually just put your PV array on the roof, put your panels up and run your cables. You didn't have to have an earth bonded rail or module. And this problem probably would have still happened, but maybe the inverter might have survived and been able to shut down in time. But the reality is that inverters don't respond well to having what's called a bolted fault on their terminals, on their DC input. So the story behind this one is the customer had put in 2 inverters and 2 arrays, and it was, for its time, a big system. It was 2 kilowatt PV arrays. But when they got their first bill, their bill had gone from $200 a quarter to $1,200 a quarter. Now, that's not what you want to hear when you put in solar and you spend a bit of money doing it. You expect it to actually save you money, not push your bill up 6-fold. So what was the problem? I'll be fairly brief on this one, but the problem really was that even though the system configuration was fine, what they found was that the inverter was hot night and day, and for some reason the customer didn't think this was a big problem initially. They did contact the installation company who replaced the inverter, but they replaced it at the end of the day when the sun was gone down, so they couldn't test it. Next day, same problem. Inverter was still hot. And that's when the network operator got involved and they sent out an inspector. And what the inspector found is this. And they're only measuring AC with an AC tong tester, but they found AC on the DC cables of PV-Array 2 amps on the positive and 11 amps on the negative. Oh dear, oh dear. And that's what it looked like up on the roof. So there you go. Some holes burnt into the roof by those cables. So yeah, and what caused it? Well, it's hard to say, but we suspect it was probably poor mating of plugs and sockets, whether it was a mismatched brand, whether it was installer made cables that weren't properly crimped and the gland hadn't been tightened up properly, plus all the cables were left lying on the roof. So yeah, it was pretty bad. And yeah, it caused not only a large bill because their inverter became a load instead of a generator. It was consuming 66 kilowatt hours a day, but also burnt some holes in their roof. And that would have been dangerous, by the way. That would have been AC on that roof. If you touched the roof, you would have got an AC shock. It's like seriously dangerous. So lucky the inspector was smart enough to turn off the system, isolate before testing. So there you go. Okay, we're getting towards the end of today, and I'm sort of looking at the chat. I can't see any questions coming in there. Like I say, I really love it when you prompt me for some things. I think Ray did mention one, which maybe I see if I've got time to find it. So I have to do this live. It'll be 4777 part 1, and it'll be at what point you have to have balanced generation. You can't have an imbalance like 10 kilowatts on one phase and nothing on the others. So let's search for balanced. Phase balance, Appendix C. Yeah, I found it. Okay, good. So I'll go back to showing you that. Okay, so Ray, in 4777 part 1, 2021 edition, and I'll make this a bit bigger for you, get rid of that side. This is for a multi-phase system, so multi-phase installation. So where you've got multiple single-phase inverters, once you get more than 5 kVA per phase, you've got to have the aggregation. That means they all switch off together, and they have to be in balanced mode. But multi-mode inverters with only a battery port, so not a solar import, it's also the same. Also EVSE equipment, electric vehicle supply equipment, capable of reverse power. Now that's a bit of an odd one because it would mean that the vehicle would need to be 4777 Part 2 certified to be able to reverse power from its inverter in the car, as opposed to a DC fast charging bidirectional. This is pretty simple. There's no requirement for 4777 of the car, just that the bidirectional inverter would need to be 4777 Part 2 certified. So there you go. And I think there's some more settings in here. Yeah, so multi-phase inverter capacity, greater than 50 kVA. I'll leave that for you to read. Now, I should mention that these standards are available even if you're not a installer. You can join the Smart Installer program and get a copy of 4777 Part 1 for free, and for $99 the bundle, which would include some other useful standards. I should actually find out what the full list is. So there you go. Well, I think we've come to the end of today's Toolbox Tech Talk, but I do have a little announcement about the next Toolbox Tech Talk, and I better just check my notes. Yeah, so the next live have to skip a week because I'm actually having a holiday. Yay! So next Sunday I'll be on holiday, but the following Sunday I'll be back live. However, if I do have time in the intermediary time between now and next Sunday, I'll see if I can do a pre-record one and launch it at 1 p.m. So it'll be kind of live, but I will be on holiday. We'll see if that works. I haven't done that before. Yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. And don't forget to do all the usual things that help YouTubers like me, you know, the thumbs up and the subscribing and etc. It really does help a lot. Okay, I'm out. See ya.
Every word that comes out is a lie. Make you look like you're so ice. You won't make it to the finish line. Now if you gotta know the truth was gonna let you go. You was fine, never mind, unpredictable. Fade eye off the ground, you ain't no one. You a star, blow it up like supernova. In the nighttime, hit my hotline. Sharing secrets, you wish really was about your life. Basic bullets, with no bullets. Does your wifey know you're begging for my notice? Promise you're the same, running for the meds. Show you like my vibe, pass my candy on my wrist. Bad habits, little rabbit. Now sit down, you can have it.